Welcome back. It's the World Soccer Talk podcast, the only podcast that focuses on watching soccer on TV, online, and apps. In episode 80, we discuss what changes Fox can make to improve their next World Cup coverage, news about the UEFA Champions League returning to US airwaves next week, who the 2019 Copa America rights are going to, plus a lot of letters from you, the listeners. My name is Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, and I'm joined by my co-host Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing quite well, Chris. It's good to have a day off from the World Cup.
It is, and hopefully you, the listener, too, are having a chance to kind of catch up and take a deep breath. In a way, it's strange to have no soccer matches on, just because we've gotten used to this kind of daily, anywhere from 2 games to 3 games a day. But for a lot of us, I mean, a lot of the listeners, Kartik, you two, were used to watching on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, watching back-to-back games. So the one interesting thing for me, Kartik, is this World Cup, I have a lot more energy than I did last World Cup. And to be completely honest, it's because I'm watching less television coverage. So 4 years ago, I would have watched the games, I would have watched the pre-match, almost the second it would come on. Post-match, I would watch all of that. And then I'd be watching the World Cup Tonight show with Lallis and the whole crew. I mean, Twelman, Burley, on the set in Rio, Roberto Martinez, and I think it was Men in Blazers too. So each of the days of the World Cup 4 years ago, it was a long day, a lot of TV viewing. Yeah. So far for this World Cup, I've been watching just mostly the games. And once the game's over, I'm checking out. And for me, it's been better in a way in terms of not being burnt out after, 3 weeks of the tournament. How about you?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I'm fresher this tournament than I've been previous major international tournaments. There have been other factors. I think the 2016 between the Euros and Copa, I was dead. I mean, I think I even took a couple of weeks off of football, if you remember, those of you who listened to the show back then. And just guy came back into the club season a mess because it had been too much back to back. Copa America here in the U.S., the Euros in France, running simultaneously at times. The two major confederation, the two big tournaments outside the World Cup in international football happening simultaneously for the first time since 2004. So that was tough. 2014 World Cup, I completely agree, Chris. I think I was exhausted at the end of those days. I would try and watch every bit of ESPN coverage. I also think thinking back 2010 World Cup, I tried to get as much of the coverage, absorb as much of the coverage as possible. So I do think I'm fresher. Now, here's the difference. I think, unfortunately, in those World Cups and Euros, I'm going to admit this now to listeners who, many of you have been listening to me for a decade, so I'm going to admit I cheat a bit, which is not something I should, but I'm going to. A lot of those tournaments, there are drab, dour matches. And there are also matches when you look at the schedule, the fixtures before the tournament, you're like, yeah, maybe this is a day I can kind of mail it in, right? I can kind of tweak my schedule accordingly. That happened in the Euros in 16. That happened in World Cup in 2014. That happened in the Copa. That happened definitely in World Cup 2010, which was not a particularly good tournament in my opinion. This World Cup has been really good. So, Chris, it's the best since 1986. It's quite possibly the best since 1970. That might be blasphemy to a lot of you football historians out there, but it's been that good this tournament thus far. Granted, we're only at the quarterfinal stage, but to this point, it's up there with 86 and 70 as the best World Cups of all time.
I will agree that it's been exciting. I would not say it's been the best since 1970. I mean, to me, 1982 is the one that I always go back to, and it was just an incredible World Cup from start to finish. And I'm sure in that World Cup too, there were some boring games. But going back to what you said, Kartik, I think all of us are guilty of that in many ways. The listeners, sometimes there'll be games on. If it's Sweden against Denmark or something like that, and it's kind of a nothing game. I mean, it means a lot, but both the teams are canceling each other out. So sometimes I'm working at the same time, so I'm not have the 100% focus on the game. Others I'll be, we'll switch off all devices and we'll just focus on that one game. So I think, and sometimes, even recording games, sometimes in the past I would fast forward through games. So nothing to be ashamed of, especially with soccer with so much on, and we've got our lives and families and everything else going on at the same time. But it has been an exciting World Cup for sure. I think a lot of it, has been just the number of goals and a lot of late goals. There's been a lot of people talking about the surprises, and to me, that there actually haven't been that many surprises in this World Cup. To me, the biggest surprise is Germany getting knocked out. Everything else, for the most part, is going according to plan. I don't think there's any huge surprises.
Yeah, I would say maybe Russia beating Spain, but when you play the host country, even if you're a favorite, there's a chance you lose. So yeah, I mean, if you look at the quarterfinals, Chris, honestly, there isn't anyone where it blows your mind. Oh my gosh, I can't believe. I mean, there are people saying that about Sweden, but Sweden historically has been very good. It's just this is a post-Zlatan, post-Henrik Larsson Sweden, a period of time when we thought they were probably going to rebuild and not make this World Cup. But it's still Sweden, who have a pretty tremendous international pedigree. And then who else? Uruguay, I think most of us thought would be there. I think they'll be in the final, although I'm hedging now with Cavani's injury. But I picked them before the tournament to make the final. France, we knew they'd be there. England, we thought they could be there. Belgium, we knew they'd be there. Brazil, we knew they'd be there. So I don't know that there are that many real shocks. Croatia, we thought they could be there, but they always underachieve. But if they finally reach their potential, not only are they quarterfinalists, maybe they're finalists. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I've bought into that narrative that there have been so many surprises. But Chris, now that you mentioned who's actually still standing, Russia's the only one that of the eight that I could say, oh boy, that's kind of a surprise, but they're hosting, so that's an equalizer.
And that's been the narrative for the most part from Fox, is this World Cup is full of surprises. Well, it really isn't. I mean, to me, at the end of the day, and to me, I love soccer. I mean, soccer is my life. I can't watch Fox's pre-match and post-match analysis in the studio. I've tried. I've given them plenty of chances, but it's so repetitive. It's uninformative. It's boring and predictable, and it has absolutely zero value. And so what I've done is really I've kind of tuned in. I'll tune in for maybe a couple of minutes to see who's on the set. I'll switch off and then either listen to the radio or catch up on some work, and then go back to watch the game itself. And to me, that Fox is missing out. I mean, I'm not the only one, I'm sure. Fox is missing out big time on trying to captivate that viewer, trying to get them in early, starting watching the pre-game, the hype building up to the game, halftime, when all those ads are coming at you, post-match, trying to captivate that viewer, keep them watching, and then late night trying to get them to encourage to go back and watch some of the comedy or some of the analysis that they have. And to me, Fox has run out of things to talk about now that Messi and Ronaldo are out of the tournament. And the daily discussion, Kartik, I don't think you've been watching it, but it's now turned to power rankings every single day. So you have Rob Stone talking about power rankings, and Alexi going through and saying, "Oh, watch out, guys! I think Mexico is going to go up if they win this game against Brazil." So on and so forth, and even some of the commentators have picked up on that and saying, "Okay, well, I wonder what this result will mean to Alexi's power rankings." and you laugh.
I wasn't aware of this.
But... Right. Well, you've been missing all this fun. So I've pretty much given up on watching Fox's coverage. What I've been doing is switching either to Telemundo at times. Not as much Telemundo right now because it's an SD for me. It's not in HD. Now, one tip is I have Fubo and I'm a cord cutter, so I can go into Telemundo, Deportes, and Vivo, the app, and then log in with my Fubo credentials and then get a stream which is pretty much HD quality. It's a really high quality stream. So that's one way of doing it. The other thing I've been doing is watching quite a bit of ITV on a VPN. Or watching something completely different entirely, catching up on podcasts during kind of the pre-match or post-match, or just catching up on other things. But to me, Fox's inability to hold my attention is a sad indictment, and I don't think I'm the only one. And I'm someone who's usually very patient. I'll give them plenty of chances, and I'll keep on coming back. But at this point, I've pretty much given up and ready to move on.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, to supplement my own lack of Fox watching, zero Fox watching, quite frankly. And I've actually been stoned. I've talked to some of the people I know, and they're saying, "Well, we're trying to watch Fox. We're watching Fox." I applaud them for their patience because I gave up on Fox before the tournament, and maybe that's an indictment of me to a certain extent. But I wasn't willing to put up with this nonsense. I don't want to be. I don't want to have my blood pressure raised. I mean, this month is stressful enough for those of us in the business. I don't need my blood pressure raised by having to watch Fox and react to Fox punditry, the very generic, Americanized punditry that they give. But I've had to supplement my viewing by watching YouTube videos of like Tifo Football's excellent YouTube videos, which I've been watching since they debuted a couple of years ago as UMax 90, I think they were in those days, or UMax Football. Been having to supplement with that. I've been supplementing with trying to get as much ITV and BBC coverage as possible. Obviously, I've been watching Telemundo, and I've been watching ESPN FC, and anytime I know the great Taylor Twellman. And I use that term. I know that's a loaded term, but compared to the pundits we're seeing on Fox, Taylor Twellman is the great American pundit of international football. Anytime Taylor Twellman is on ESPN, and I'm aware he'll be on, I'll make sure I DVR it or watch it live and give it a listen. But I'm not watching Fox. I empathize a little bit with Fox. I think that they may not have realized how great the backlash would be. ESPN had this same sort of tournament in 2006, and they quickly pivoted before the Euros in 2008. Fox won't have another major international tournament, I don't believe, until 2022. The 2022 World Cup, the Euros in 2020 are on ESPN still. So maybe this will be a learning experience. Is that me being too generous, Chris, or is this who they are?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, when I was thinking about Fox's coverage today, it's not that they're dumbing down the coverage. It's just that it's very blasé. It's very, a flat line. There isn't much, there's very little really intelligent analysis, except when you've had the Martin O'Neill, Clarence Seedorf, and Alexi Lalas, and Kate Abdo. So the four of them work really well together. But I think it's fair. I mean, it really is. And it's not meant to be any Fox bashing. It's meant to be more of honest criticism. It's just it's not really interesting to watch. There's very few surprises. ITV as one example. And this is something a little bit different, but ITV, I watched the first half of the England-Colombia game on Fox, and it had Derek Ray and Ali Wagner, and I thought that both of them did great. This is probably the best game that they've commentated, so I watched the first half. And then halftime, I switched over to ITV to see what they were doing. ITV, as soon as I switched on, Gary Neville was talking about calling one of the Colombian coaches a numpty, which is an English kind of slang word for an idiot. And I was like, what's this about? I didn't see anything on Fox about this. And what had happened was one of the Colombian coaches had shoulder barged Raheem Sterling as he was running off the pitch at halftime. And so I thought, this is really good analysis. I mean, this is something I didn't see on Fox. They're going into detail about how disrespectful this is, and kind of how dirty the Colombia team was in that first half. And then the rest of the match I watched on ITV with the commentary. And I'd say actually the commentary on ITV isn't the greatest.
Who were the commentators?
It was Clive Tildesley and Glenn Hoddle. Glenn Hoddle's pretty humdrum, pretty boring. Clive Tildesley is kind of an iconic British announcer, not the greatest, not the worst. He's just okay. And actually, one of the matches I watched earlier in the week was Sam Matterface commentating, and then Gary Neville as co-commentator. And Sam Matterface was fine, but to me, kind of stooped down to kind of talk sport level, with I think another corny, cliche kind of statement. I think after Schmeichel saved one of the penalties, talking about how he saved Dane's bacon, or something like that, which is a very kind of British remark to make in terms of Danish bacon, which is they're famous for that. And that's something that reminded me of John Strong talking about, Iceland beats Argentina 1-1, that kind of statement.
There is a lack of freshness to ITV's coverage. Okay, so I've, as I prefaced a few minutes ago, I've watched a lot of ITV and the BBC to supplement or to offset me not watching Fox. Clyde Tilsley has been calling every World Cup that I can remember since '98, and Brian Moore was around then too for ITV. But he's very tired to me. It's a tired voice, and it's funny. I don't feel that way about Martin Tyler when he calls Premier League matches, but I do feel that way about Clyde Tilsley. And Glenn Hoddle to me is just terrible. I loved him as a player. I think he knows the game in and out, but just he's poor. I haven't been impressed with Ryan Giggs. Gary Neville has been hit or miss. Lee Dixon, I don't think has been as good as he is on NBC. Slaven Bilic is good. I've liked him a lot when I've seen him.
I think
I haven't been thrilled with ITV. Whereas BBC, Chris, we'll get into this in a minute, they've been really good. I've liked the BBC coverage a lot.
Yeah. I think ITV's commentary is their weakness, and the actual analysis to me is okay. It's good. I mean, you got Martin O'Neill on there almost every day. Lee Dixon, maybe he's not as good as when he's on Fox, NBC. NBC because he goes into more detail, but he's been good. Gary Neville always gives some great insight about defending, which is he was praising Trippier for England as a right back, and just some of the great decisions he was making during the game. So I think the studio analysis is fine, but to me, I'd much prefer to watch that studio analysis than I would Fox's studio analysis. And Fox is not giving me anything with ITV. At least the analysis is interesting. There's some different things they're talking about, which, I mean, if I'd watched Fox's coverage... Oh, actually, so I tuned in back into Fox's coverage for the second half of the England game against Colombia, and Derek Ray, to his credit, right at the beginning said there's been reports of a half-time kind of skirmish between Raheem Sterling and one of the Colombian coaches. And full credit to Derek Ray for mentioning that, because otherwise Fox would have completely ignored it. And that's something from Derek Ray's perspective with his experience. I'm sure he was keeping an eye on Twitter and probably saw a tweet about that and then just kind of mentioned it to the viewers. And that's fantastic. But that's something that the studio analysis at halftime should be doing, keeping a close eye on things like that.
Right. And I've noticed in the past at Fox tournaments, John Strong's come back after halftime. Or JP Del Cam or whoever, and have to give that information. Rob Stone is never giving that information. On the BBC front, I'll say Cesc Fabregas and Pablo Zabaleta have been really good. I think Alan Shearer and Jermaine Genius are better than I remember them doing other things for the BBC. They've been very, very good. I think when I've seen Rio Ferdinand, he hasn't been bad. I think just in general, they've been better. I like, obviously, at ITV, I like Jackie Oatley. I think she's always good. But I've been underwhelmed with them otherwise. I'll disagree with you a little bit on that. And I have been underwhelmed by Gary Neville this tournament, honestly. I mean, maybe it's because of the standard I expect from him, but it seems like he's not giving me the level of insight and tactical analysis I get when I'm watching the BBC pundits.
Yeah,
including Shearer, believe it or not, who I've in the past been very critical of.
Yeah, and Gary Neville too, as far as kind of being on Sky Sports, kind of the Sky Sports Monday Night Football. But that I think it has more time to prepare, more time to kind of look at analysis. And with the World Cup happening, it's very much very spontaneous. And that's the thing that's lacking in the studio for Fox, is that it is so scripted, it is so formulaic, that they don't seem to be able to adapt to anything that happens, especially late in the games where they need to kind of comment on it. Usually they'll just kind of ignore it and just stick to the scripts or stick to the talking points. How much
of this is having a Rob Stone versus having a Bob Lee or Mike Tirico? Because I think as I talk to people, and again, I'm not watching Fox's coverage, so I'm relying on a lot of you that listen to the show, read worldsoccertalk.com, interact with me on Twitter, to fill in the gaps here. But my takeaway from what a lot of you are telling me is that it's the buttons that are being pushed by the host are incorrect, or are not provocative, or are not actually reacting to what's been going on, and they're very scripted. Now, when Kate Apto is in there, it's a little bit better. So I'm thinking, as much as it's the Fox problem, it may also be the wrong choice of host, which is unfortunate because Rob Stone is a soccer guy, but maybe he's better as a soccer guy in the role ESPN previously had him in World Cups from '98 to 2010. He was covering all those World Cups. And he was a guy that was a reporter. He was a guy who specialized in the U.S. team. He did some features, but maybe he's not the guy to host a studio at a major tournament.
I think a lot of it depends on the producer and in terms of how much flexibility that Rob Stone has. So, you mean, if the producer kind of keeps everything really tight, okay, here's the talking points, bang, 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 bang. Okay, this is all the time we have. Let's move on. You mean to commercials, or if the producer has more kind of, I guess. I guess trust, really. It's really kind of a trust factor in that host to say to the host, okay, if you spot something and you want to bring something up on the fly, go ahead and mention it. And guys, you mean kind of the analysts on the team, Lallis, Martin O'Neill, Clarence, be ready, because I'm probably going to talk about this topic. This is a big one. And with Rob, as far as his questioning, it is very softball, basic, nothing too deep. And with Kate, she's a little bit better than that, and seems more relaxed on set. But I mean, so Kate, so again, it could be the producer, it could be the host, but whatever it is, the chemistry is there between Lallis and Rob Stone. But really, kind of, you don't. I mean, to me, to this point, I mean, it's still the best team is Martin O'Neill, Clarence Sadoff, Lallis, and Kate Abdo. And it's so rare to have them all on the set at the same time. Because Martin O'Neill's working for ITV. Clarence, we're still not sure if he has other commitments. Lallis is always there. And then usually they'll bring in, Kelly Smith or Ian Wright. And then flip back and forth between Kate and Rob Stone.
There's been a lot of criticism of Lexi Lallis from people giving me thoughts. I have seen Lallis excel in these situations. I don't want to sound like I'm being overly defensive of him, because I share some of the very same critiques about him. But I have seen him excel in these situations if the buttons are pushed correctly, Chris. And you have too. I know you have in major tournaments. Euro 2012 on ESPN when the hosts were either Bob Lee or Rebecca Lowe. Same thing in World Cup 2014 with Mike Tirico. I mean, it's. I think it's a byproduct of who he's surrounded with, because I hear constant complaints about Lallis, but they're different than what we were dealing with in 12 and 14 and 10, going back to 10 on ESPN with him.
Yeah, and especially
this is a return to 2006 Alexi Lallis, really, when he was terrible during that World Cup, but by 2010 he was quite good. So I think he's like that guy in a team that's a central defender, because that's what he played. That his mistakes reflect those around him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have a lot of listeners that work within ESPN, within beIN Sports, within Fox, within NBC. So a lot of them are listening to this, probably nodding their heads and saying, yeah, I mean, there's definitely a way to get the best out of Lallis. You either love Lallis or you hate him, but many of us will watch him just to see what he says and to get that reaction. And I think Fox is still trying to figure out what that chemistry is. 3 weeks into the tournament, they should know by now. It's learning lessons for the next World Cup. And let's talk about that, Kartik. Let's talk about the next World Cup. To me, I have no problem naming names, but for me, from the current crew that Fox has right now, the only ones that I would keep for the next World Cup that are on the studio set, so not the commentators, but just the studio set, are Kate Abdo, Martin O'Neill, Clarence Sadoff, Alexi Lallis, Ian Joy, which we hardly see, but he's there. Actually, not in Russia, but he's in Los Angeles. And that's it. And to me, out goes Kelly Smith, Gus Hiddink, Moises Munoz, Hernan Crespo, Fernando Fiore, Kobe Jones, Dr. Joe, Ian Wright, and Grant Wall. To me, those folks add no value. I see from Fox's perspective, in terms of them wanting to keep a mostly all-American crew for World Cup 2018, but probably, I'm sure, for 2022 too. And I think they need to go aggressively into the hiring mode to get the people, the talent that they need to really have a really good studio analysis team. And they're out there, Kartik. I mean, you mentioned before, just at the beginning of this show, Taylor Twellman. Again, Taylor Twellman is somebody that a lot of people love, a lot of people hate, but he is as a studio
I
analyst,
don't know who
one of the
hates him
best.
anymore. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
so I think what's happened is because of Fox getting their hands on so many major tournaments, the Women's World Cup, the Gold Cup, the Copa America, and now the World Cup. Those people who criticized Twelman 4 years ago now wish that he were there. So I think that if there are people who have been critical of Twelman in the past, they may be critical of Twelman in the past because they're protecting some sort of entity that he criticizes. I don't think anyone who's an objective soccer fan in this country is any longer critical of Taylor Twelman.
Well, that's
I'm
the
being
thing.
perfectly honest. That's my experience. Everybody I talk to loves him.
Well, no. I love him. I mean, when you said that about objective soccer fans, there's a lot of soccer fans out there that are not objective. So, but there's a lot of people out there that still do not like him for whatever reason. But to me,
Yeah, I haven't come across those people, but okay.
Okay, they're out there. Trust me. But to me, Taylor Twelman should be somebody that you try to get from ESPN and bring him over to Fox. I mean, give him however much money he needs, and that's somebody that Twelman and Lallis right there. You've got that chemistry, and you've got that debate because they don't agree all the time. They're going to debate on set. The other person, Kyle Martino. Imagine if you had a set. You had say Abda hosting, you had Lallis, Taylor Twelman, and Kyle Martino. All four of those on set debating a topic or going into more detail. Those guys are all talkative, so you'd have to have a host that would be able to kind of cut them short.
This goes back to the whole Fox thing. Okay, so Casey Keller has been very good in Bristol on ESPN FC. No surprise there. Brian McBride has been in the last week, and he was terrible when he was on Fox doing Champions League. He is really good when he's surrounded by Dan Thomas asking the right questions, Stuart Robson or Steve McManaman, and Craig Burley. I mean, I really liked McBride's analysis this last week during this World Cup.
Yep.
He could go back to Fox and do a credible job if the surrounding cast is good. So that goes back to the initial point, I think, Chris, we're thinking, which is this is more cultural and institutional at each network versus specific to talent. I agree with your list. I think my list would be exactly the same. I get rid of the people you have on there with the possible exception of Dr. Joe, depending on how he's used. But I agree with that. I agree with the list of people you keep. But I think it's more Fox, ESPN production-wise. I know that that's a very cruel, harsh reality to deal with. Mm-hmm. But maybe any amount of talent you plug in on the Fox team isn't going to change it. Because, again, just take McBride, for example. Unlistenable when he was on the Champions League on Fox.
Yep.
It's excellent top-drawer analysis I've seen now for several years. He's not a regular on ESPN FC, but they basically bring him in for a month, 1 month each, or a week each month. This month, it happens to be this week. And really top drawer stuff because he's got Craig Burley next to him. He's got Ali Moreno. He's got Dan Thomas. He's got, this week it's been Maka. The previous week it was Stuart Robson. But, they always have this collection of talent that brings the best out of their pundits who know the sport. Every single one of these people, I know there'll be people on Twitter and such fans who say, Alexi Lalas doesn't know football. Yeah, well, he does actually. But it's who you surround them with and how you bring the best out of them. And Fox just doesn't do it. They've proven time and again they're not able to do it. My hope is they blow it up for World Cup 2022, and institutionally they do what ESPN did after 2006.
And I don't think they will, though. And that's the issue, just because of the Women's World Cup next summer. So you can guarantee that Rob Stone's going to be hosting. You can guarantee Lallis will be there. And you can guarantee that probably Kelly Smith's going to be there. It's going to be probably mostly the same crew. I don't think there's going to be that many changes. And, Fox probably looking at the TV ratings probably says, like, even with the US not in the World Cup, we're doing pretty well. I mean, the games that have brought in the most number of viewers so far, most of them have been Mexico games, but averaging roughly on the high end with Telemundo and Fox combined for TV anywhere from 9 million to 11 to 12 million. So the numbers are decent. I mean, without the US in the World Cup just shows that there's a voracious appetite for soccer in the United States, no matter if you're watching Fox or Telemundo or whatever you're watching. It's out there. There's demand out there for sure. But I don't see Fox changing that much. I mean, to me, whoever's advising them on the talent should be fired. I mean, the crew that they have, for the most part, are weak. The whole issue with Lothar Matthäus, which is laughable at this point in terms of actually after the World Cup had already started, opening weekend, effectively letting him go. I don't know if he was fired or what, and talking about schedule conflicts. Meanwhile, anyone watching the World Cup, you've seen Lothar Matthäus so many times in the crowd for all the big games, and he's been doing analysis for beIN Sports. So anyone watching the beIN Sports World Cup Extra program, you would have seen Lothar Matthäus giving his analysis on that show. So I don't know what happened there.
Moment, I think it was during the Croatia Denmark game where I got home in the middle of the first half and got to watch it on Telemundo from there on out. But I was out with some friends getting lunch, watching it on Fox at the beginning, and the camera, I think it was that game, panned to Lothar Matthäus. Yep. Now, I wonder what was said by the...
Well, it's funny because I think the first 3 or 4 times that Lothar Matthäus, 3 or 4 different matches that Lothar Matthäus appeared on screen, I think JP was one of them, John Strong was another one, but the commentator kind of didn't mention Lothar Matthäus until there was like halftime highlights for one of the games, and I think Alexi Lalas said like, oh, look, there's Lothar Matthäus there. Which to me then actually says that probably Fox has no control over the highlights, because in that case, if it's coming from HBS, which is the host broadcasting service, which is worldwide, they're probably getting that feed of the halftime or post-match highlights. Otherwise, if Fox was editing those highlights, they would have cut out the Lothar Matthäus part of it. But Kartik, anything else? I mean, looking at the next World Cup, 4 years away, but is there anything else that you would change to improve their Fox's analysis and to get you, as one example, to get you watching Fox instead of watching Telemundo?
Yeah, get rid of the clunky graphics, get rid of the the way they produce things is different than ESPN. We've talked about this forever on this show. The way they produce things is different than NBC. There's these loud graphics. There's these, talk over. There's this kind of dumbing down of terminology. Even if you watch the beginning of a program, even before they throw it to Rob Stone, I've done actually during this World Cup. I've said, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. 9:00. Let me flip it on, or if I'm in my office, 9:00, let me flip it on my iPad instead of going into the lounge and watching it on Telemundo or the conference room. And I'm lost in the intro. I mean, it's not like ESPN. It's like there's always this very kind of dignified opening. You know what I'm saying, Chris. Yeah. I think a lot of listeners won't. So that would be the first thing I change, because even to hook me, even when I tried to watch it, I'm like, this is typical Fox. And it's just like Fox News. I mean, you turn it, or there are other cable news channels that are like that. They're just very loud and abrasive, and they feel like the viewer has no critical thinking skills or no independent thought, and they got to ram it home on you.
Right.
And our society isn't like that anymore. I'm sorry. I don't know if it ever was like that, but there's a fundamental misunderstanding of their audience. And so until they do some actual market research, instead of making assumptions about the people they're marketing to and the audience, Chris, based on hopefulness, who they want to hook, or based on their own biases and prejudices. I know they'll say they have market research saying, we can engage the average American sports fan, we can engage all the people in middle America doing this. But to this point, it is proven not to be a winning formula. And I think it's based on an inherent bias. You could say, they're doing market research, but they're starting at a certain point wanting to prove that their built-in biases are correct. Now, people could argue that about you and me, Chris, and a lot of the people who listen to our show and interact with us in the game, that we're inherently biased. We prefer a more anglicized version of presentation versus an Americanized version. That's fair. But I think the market has judged this now. I think what we've seen between 2006 and 2018 is an evolution in how Americans who actually are interested in this sport want to engage and consume this sport. Okay? So you have to respond to that. That is the market. That is your audience, Fox, not what you think it is. So let's hope that they get the memo in 2019 in France, Women's World Cup. Let's hope they cover it the way 2011 was covered by ESPN, not the way 2015 in Vancouver in Canada wasn't as bad as I thought it might be on Fox, but their coverage has gotten worse since then.
Yeah, for me, some of the changes I would make, one is to not have so much pre-match coverage and post-match coverage. I would start probably half an hour before the game time, rather than, I think Kate Abdo has the early show, which starts at 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time, and then you have Rob Stone coming at 9 o'clock Eastern for the 10 o'clock game. So you have effectively 3 hours of pre-game coverage, which is way too much. So I would start half an hour before, and then post-match, keep it to 30 minutes. I mean, because it seems to be just dragged out. Yes, it's showing highlights, but dragged out with no information in all that time. The other thing I would focus on is that late night show. And for anyone who missed it, Trevor Noah, who's a stand-up comedian but also does, I think, a late night show, had a short segment talking about the differences between American commentators, British commentators, and then Latino commentators. And to me, having the late night show be hosted by a late night person or somebody with late night experience would be much better than the current format, which now really is Kate Abdo and Fernando Fiore working together. I think they saw pretty quickly that Fernando Fiore by himself could not lead this as a host. But I would change the format of that. And then studio analysis, I would gut it, replace them with some intelligent people that could have intelligent conversations and give viewers a opportunity to keep on watching that channel rather than flipping back and forth between other channels. And that to me, it's not rocket science. I mean, we know who this talent is. We know the good ones, the bad ones, the mediocre ones. It shouldn't be rocket science. And that's the thing too. Going back to Fox. I mean, Fox 4 years ago was in Brazil on ESPN set. ESPN invited them to sit in on the set, to see how the production was handled, to behind the scenes, to see how they went through the whole routine on a daily basis. So 4 years ago, Fox would have had some really great intelligence about what ESPN was doing. Yes, Fox wants to put their own spin on it, and it is Fox's style, which is completely different. But there must have been some things they must have learned from there 4 years ago. For now, maybe it was more on the back end production side. Maybe it wasn't on the talent side. Maybe they thought on the talent side they had it taken care of. And as we've seen up until this point, it's been mediocre, really mediocre. So, Kartik, buying tickets can be complicated and confusing, but there is a better way to buy, and that's with SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to every type of live event. Whether you're searching for a last-minute deal, planning a night out with friends, or need to find the perfect gift, SeatGeek helps you find the best seats at the best prices, fully guaranteed. There's nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. Now, I have the SeatGeek app on my phone, and it's by far the easiest way I've found to shop for tickets. I can be anywhere, and just with a few taps, I can instantly find seats. I actually just used SeatGeek this week to look for tickets for the International Champions Cup games coming to South Florida for my kids. Now, SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. It saves you time and money by searching multiple ticket sites to compare prices and find amazing deals. And to get the most bang for your buck, SeatGeek grades every ticket based on value to help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. Plus, every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. Make SeatGeek your go-to app for finding the best deals on every type of ticket, from sports and concerts to comedy and theatre. And best of all, my listeners get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code WSTPod today. That's promo code WSTPod for $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Now, Kartik, let's move on to TV streaming news.
Yeah, some of you may have heard this already this week. Verizon is shutting down the Go90 app, Chris. Obviously, that affects NWSL more than anything in terms of viewers in the U.S. I'm told NWSL will continue to produce the matches using VistaLink in Fort Lauderdale, where their announcers are based and where the production teams are based, and will distribute them themselves, at least for the remainder of this 2018 NWSL. So if you're a fan of women's football, women's soccer, there's going to be no interruption in actually being able to see the matches. You'll just consume them differently after the end of July. It's July 30th, I believe they're shutting down, July 31st.
Yeah, to me, actually, this one is a bigger hit for those that watch beIN Sports. So, I mean, the perfect example is the World Cup qualifiers, especially when they involve the U.S. men's national team, and it's an away game in Trinidad or in Honduras or wherever. A lot of those games, the rights to those games are on beIN Sports, and for a lot of viewers and listeners that may not watch beIN Sports that much, that's for the average U.S. men's national team soccer fan who's like a diehard fan. He or she may just watch Major League Soccer and watch the men's team or women's team. So it's very unlikely that they're watching beIN Sports that much. And this was a great gateway to get them into watching beIN Sports for free. That's gone. So, I mean, the good thing about beIN Sports is we know that it's available through almost all the streaming devices or platforms out there. So it is very accessible. But to me, this is the big hit. And we'll have to wait and see what happens because, if it's somebody else that kind of picks up something similar to this, I doubt it, though. I think GoNanny's gone and it's bit the dust, and we move on to Sling TV and Fubo and DirecTV Now, etc. Now, in the next piece of news, Optus, which is a streaming service in Australia, has handed over all of the rights to all remaining World Cup games to SBS, which is the TV company in Australia, after a streaming disaster. We reported this a couple of weeks ago that they were having problems with, I think, the first week of games, streaming issues, and they went ahead and temporarily gave some of the games to SBS to go ahead and stream there. Now they've officially kind of thrown up their hands and said we can't do it, and all the games now are on SBS on the streaming as well as television. So thank God we didn't have to experience anything like this in the US, but I feel sorry for those fans down under that had to go through this experience.
Yeah, I've been hearing all about that since actually the first day of the World Cup from folks in Australia, since the Saudi Arabia-Russia game. It problems starting from the get-go. Moving on, Bleacher Report, some of you who follow me on Twitter would have already tweeted it earlier. Bleacher Report will officially debut its live coverage of the UEFA Champions League on Tuesday. They're the new rights holders, remember, or Turner Sports, their parent is, with their first game, which will feature Celtic in the qualifying rounds of the competition. The game will be available for free via the Bleacher Report live website and app. So that's another exciting thing. The note I got said it's free on us, which is neat. I don't know how much longer that free service will run. Maybe through the qualifying rounds. Maybe it's just going to be to hook in Celtic fans these first two matches and hope they progress, and then they'll start charging. But it will be free next Tuesday, usual Champions League start time in the afternoon U.S. time.
Yeah, and the free streaming was supposed to end June 30th. So it's interesting that they're continuing this for a little bit longer. They're also going to have Europa League games. And full credit to Bleacher Report. I mean, they've got all of the qualifying rounds, all of those games. So a lot of the games that in previous years Fox didn't show, even on like Fox Soccer Match Pass, they didn't show it on there. Games featuring really, really small teams from really small countries. Those games are going to be on Bleacher Report Live.
Yeah. So once I got the note about the Celtic match this morning, we're recording on Wednesday, by the way, July 4th. I went onto the app, opened it, and couldn't believe the list of matches in Europa League that they're going to show. All these obscure, the sub qualifying rounds, Eastern European teams mostly, or Nordic teams, Scandinavian teams. Really impressive that they're, I guess, going to take the UEFA streams, because UEFA does stream every match, and throw it on Bleacher Report Live. So for those of you who were thinking about signing up when they make it a pay service, I think they're going to offer us potentially, just based on that first look, a lot more than maybe we thought they were.
Yep.
They're probably going to give us everything.
Yeah, and in previous summers we've had West Ham United and other teams that had to go through, I think Everton too, had to go through qualifying rounds of Europa League, and most of those games weren't available. Or some of them actually were available on beIN Sports for like a month before Fox would actually start showing the games in late August or so. And here we are, beginning of July, and we've got games available, which is great to see. Moving on, Telemundo has acquired the Spanish language TV and streaming rights to Copa America 2019, which will be hosted in Brazil. In addition to the teams from CONMEBOL, who will be participating, the invited teams will be Japan and Qatar. So no USA, no Mexico. For Japan, that's another great opportunity to continue to step up the ladder. And for Qatar, it's all about 2022 and trying to get this team in a shape where they're going to be, hopefully getting out of the group stages. I'm sure that's what Qatar's hoping for.
and it's going to be very interesting watching this on Telemundo coming off of our World Cup, Chris. I'm kind of excited to see how this goes because Univision, I think, has been also the go-to place for Copa Americas in the past in Spanish, but Mexico being out of the tournament may have opened the door for Telemundo to outbid them, or who knows what Univision's interest was. But Telemundo now building a portfolio of international tournaments where that kind of might shift people's thought process about who is the go-to network in Spanish for soccer. Of course, Univision does start Champions League coverage this summer.
And and English rights too. So English rights we don't know yet. So that hasn't been decided. My guess is beIN Sports retains that. I think with Fox having the Gold Cup, and they're going to have a lot on their shoulders. And to me, at least, beIN Sports seems like the most attractive one. But I'm sure there's other suitors trying to get those.
And the Women's World Cup, right? I mean, the timing of these Copa America tournaments don't fit Fox, which is unfortunate for them. I don't know that they fit ESPN's thought process either. It seems ESPN, even though they pulled back a little bit in soccer coverage, they're all in on UEFA. UEFA international competitions. They're going to be the home of the Nations League as well, in addition to the Euros. Moving on, Univision and Dish are in a carriage dispute. I think a lot of you who have Dish are aware of this, and it's been a lot of chatter about that. But this is ongoing, and let's hope it gets resolved. Let's hope it gets resolved before Champions League starts.
Yeah, and it also involves Sling TV too, which is owned by Dish. So all of the channels on Sling TV, so the Univision channels, so Univision Deportes, Unamas, Galavision, none of those are available through Sling TV, and I believe one of them is available through Dish. So hopefully, and it all stems to the typical type of debates about Dish says that Univision is asking for more money per subscriber, and they're having kind of basically a public battle about trying to say, okay, that their side of the argument is better, and then Univision should be getting paid more money because English channels, comparative English channels, are getting paid more than the Spanish channels. So we'll have to wait and see. It's been a rough month for Univision with the World Cup not being on Univision and with this carriage dispute. Luckily for Univision, the Liga MX season hasn't started yet. So if this goes on for quite a bit of time, which I'm sure is what Dish is hoping for, to have more leverage, then it could be difficult for Univision. Fubo TV has launched a 4K service. So for those of you who have 4K televisions, they will have select games from the World Cup available in 4K HDR from Fox and FS1. So if you do have Fubo, if you have a 4K television, check out Fubo for the 4K coverage of the World Cup. And I mean, anyone knows that the World Cup is great in HD. In 4K, I'm sure it's even better.
Sling TV, DirecTV Now, and PlayStation View are raising their prices. Sling Orange will now be $25 per month. PlayStation View are increasing their all of their plan costs by $5, while DirecTV Now is increasing their price by $5, despite promising lower consumer prices in the Time Warner trial, which was, of course, the merger, Time Warner AT&T merger, which has now been rubber stamp. So we thought we were going to get lower. Well, we didn't think we were going to get lower prices out of that, but it was mentioned that it wouldn't be anti-competitive, but judge for yourself in the future.
All right, moving on to TV streaming, actually TV ratings news, and that's Fox Sports and Major League Soccer netted some more impressive viewing figures for games immediately following World Cup games this past weekend. Seattle against Portland had 1.15 million viewers, and then Sunday's game, the Toronto-New York Red Bulls game, had 1.10 million viewers. Both of these games followed the World Cup, and they got the World Cup bounce. So for Major League Soccer, that's great news. In more realistic news, perhaps, ESPN featured the Atlanta United against Orlando City game. And I say realistic because...
I'm just laughing about Orlando and the way they performed that match. But it was 4-0 and it could have been 10-0, by the way, for those of you who didn't watch. Wow. Atlanta won.
Yeah, so the viewing figure for that was 285,000. And I say realistic because, I mean, that's people that actually sought out that game or wanted to watch that one versus had the World Cup on and then just left the television set on just to keep on going. Which, for me, oftentimes I have the TV set on all day, and I may not be watching it, but if I'm Nielsen, I'm looking at the TV ratings, or looking at that TV viewership, it looks like it appears to be someone that actually is watching those games. One more stat on the TV ratings, and that's the England-Colombia game. So in the UK, this game was on ITV. An average of 20.1 million people watched this game in its entirety. It was the most watched single minute of the game was later on in the game during the penalty kicks, when 24.4 million people tuned in. At this point, roughly 4 out of every 5 people in the UK were watching this game. So 81% of the people were tuned in to watch ITV and watch England, which is pretty incredible. 4 out of 5 people in the whole entire country were watching England against Colombia. Moving on to listener mailbag, we've got a bunch of comments here, Kartik. First one is up from Yannick Ramke via Twitter. He says, quick take on your discussion from last week's podcast. Actually, I like Fox's approach to going beyond what happens on the field, for example, the backstories, but their commentary regarding the on-field action is just unbearable. Telemundo instead focuses purely on play-by-play commentary, but nothing else. Craig Shapiro on Twitter said, World Cup live on Fox right now with the always good Kate Abdo, Martin O'Neill, Clarence Seedorf, and Alexi, and it's actually good. Alexi ridiculous as always, but having 3 good pundits next to him tempers his absurdity and makes the whole watchable. Nuke via Twitter says, the only thing I miss about the US not being in the World Cup is workplace banter and lost productivity. Feels quite odd to be the only the only one streaming every game. US is not destination viewing unless they're holding on for life. I can get that from Manchester United. Nash Rambler via comment on worldsoccertalk.com says, I've seen reporting that beginning in 2020, there are plans for a joint CONMEBOL CONCACAF Copa America tournament, which will then occur every 4 years. Are these reports credible? Have you heard anything from any of your sources that this is true? Kartik, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I've heard various theories and discussions about it. I think there is some definite intrigue to doing it. Now, the question is it something that they can sustain every 4 years? Will it lose its authenticity? Will it lose its ability to generate cash for the federations and for the 2 confederations involved? Will it also create a problem with FIFA and the calendar where clubs will not be compelled to release players for these tournaments, and players may be classified as friendlies, and players may not have to be compelled to perform. Now, I've also heard a theory, Nash, that it might be every 8 years in order to mitigate that, which makes it kind of a very abnormal thing, but then it may maintain its authenticity. Who knows where the international game is 6 years from now, if potentially there would be another one of these, because we would be coming off a Winter World Cup in Qatar. We'd be heading into a World Cup which 3 CONCACAF nations are going to be hosting in 2026, and the whole concept of nations leagues may have taken off by then. So who knows where we're going to be, but I've actually heard that theory floated by someone in the television business, maybe every 8 years for this. I kind of laughed the way you did, Chris, when I heard it, and then when I thought about it and tried to process it, I said, okay, that makes sense because that mitigates the concerns about it, but it does still generate a major cash cow for both confederations and all the member nations in them.
Yeah, the jeopardy for CONCACAF especially is if they have a CONMEBOL CONCACAF tournament every 4 years, is at some point FIFA might say, you know what, let's just join these confederations together and just have one confederation, which is the last thing that CONCACAF wants, because they would miss out on guaranteed qualification into the World Cup. And I guess the other thing, though, too, I mean, for most of the listeners, myself included, it would be a good thing to give CONCACAF teams more experience against superior teams and to get them playing at a higher level rather than playing down to the teams from the Caribbean, etc. So at the end of the day, they're looking at the money and they're probably thinking, okay, if we have Copa America Centenario and how fantastic that was in terms of generating all that money, if we have it every 4 years, is that doable? And I'm sure they're trying to figure out a way while being careful not to lose any power within CONCACAF to make that happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen. Monty Reed sent in this email. He says, always enjoy the podcast. Keep up the great work. Before the World Cup, I was against the video review. I felt like to look too long for decisions to be made, and it's not fair when a player is called offside, but it's not since play stops at the offside call. But during the World Cup, I started to change my mind. I did not mind the 10-second delay when the replay booth just wanted to do a quick check. The full reviews that I watched did not take as long as most of them in Major League Soccer takes. Until today, July 1st, the handball in the box against Spain. I disagree with the call, and then towards the end of the game when Spain had a free kick and two of their players were being held down and tackled inside the box, and there was no review. And then in the Croatia game, the defender only received a yellow card for a foul inside the box as the last defender denying a goal-scoring opportunity. What is the point of video review if it's not going to correct these major mistakes? And some of it too is it's still a little bit subjective. I mean, this is my take on this. Is that you have to look at each incident one by one, and FIFA's trying to not have too much video review during games. Otherwise, you'd be stop, start the entire game. But sometimes it's the referees in the booth saying they disagree with you, Monty. They might say that no, that's definitely not a foul, or in the case of PK in the box, that's definitely a handball. I mean, he's blocking. Maybe it was accidental, but he was blocking the header going into the net, and that prevented a goal-scoring opportunity. So a lot of it is depending on the rules. A lot of it is dependent on using video review when it's needed and not going too far. Still not perfect by any means. And also, Monty goes on to say, why does U.S. soccer, Major League Soccer, continue to push the LGBT agenda? As an American, I can care less what people do on their own time and in their own home. But as a Christian, my beliefs are that the LGBT agenda is wrong. I do not want to get into the LGBT debate, but 70% of Americans claim to be Christians. Granted, not all of the 70% believe the same way I do, but why promote an agenda that so many people have a religious issue with? How does this expand the game? I stopped watching and cheering for US soccer when they started wearing the rainbow jerseys. The day the US did not make the World Cup, I was watching Argentina play on beIN Sports Connect and was upset how beIN Sports after the game only talked about the US losing and not about all the other games that were played that night. And now Major League Soccer is making a big push too, so I've decided to stop watching Major League Soccer. One thing that makes soccer great is that I have a lot of other leagues to choose from and watch and cheer for. So my feedback on this, Kartik, is that it's a free country, and whether it's religion or sex or other issues, is that people can make their choices, and the same applies to soccer leagues and soccer federations too. So it's all dependent on each individual, and you make your choices based on that. So whether you're more attracted to a league or to a federation because they take that stand, or if the opposite happens, or if you're right in the middle and it doesn't care, it is what it is, and it's a free country.
Yeah, so a couple points here, and this is a great point to raise. First off, I think this is a reaction, U.S. Soccer and MLS, unlike Fox, unlike what I just said about Fox earlier in the show, understanding their demographic, understanding the people who tend to gravitate towards the sport in this country. 70% of the country is Christian. That is correct. In fact, I think it might be higher. But whatever the number is, the actual number of practicing church-going Christians is less. And then the people who tend to watch soccer tend to be younger, millennials, people in urban areas. They tend to have very different attitudes about this. So I think they've done the market research and made a determination based on that. If you're offended by that, then don't patron them. I want to remind people, and I've tried to remind people throughout this World Cup, we keep saying this is a national team. They're representing their country. Well, on the England badge, it very clearly says the FA. It's a team. Yeah, it represents England to a certain extent. We just went through that rating for people in England and the UK. But it is in its own way a team representing a corporation or a nonprofit or a governing body. That's the way I feel about the U.S. men's and women's national team now. After everything we've gone through, different reasons than you, than you, Monty. But I don't feel it's necessarily a national team. I think it's a team that's very much representative of a corporate entity and a nonprofit that is a very profitable nonprofit that has a marketing and television alliance with a professional soccer league and their marketing company. And the U.S. men's and women's national team are marketing devices to put more money in the pockets of those individuals who run that professional league and Soccer United marketing. So that's my determination. And I think it's a free country. Anybody can make whatever determination they want. But come in with your eyes wide open. These are not national teams. These aren't national institutions. This isn't the U.S. Army at war abroad, and politics stops at water's edge type of thing. We have to support our boys and girls abroad. These are national teams that represent institutions that, in many cases, are deeply flawed and conflict with their own personal values. And I think there are a lot of people who don't realize that when they start watching soccer.
Right. I agree with you, Kartik, but I disagree with you in that I think the vast majority, I think you're the minority. So I think the vast majority get caught up in the whole patriotism. I mean, we saw the England game,
no
how crazy the country's gone. I mean, fans just going ape shit, basically, for lack of a better word. Crazy.
The FA is an institution that's covered up child sex abuse and pedophilia, right? I mean, let's see. So if you want to think of it that way, maybe you shouldn't root for England.
But yeah, you look at each country though too, and you just look at the massive appeal and the power that country has, that FA has, really, not the country. The FA has in each of the respective countries, if they're doing well and winning games and getting close in the World Cup, how much power, whether it's from sponsorship, whether it's from advertising, whether it's from all those, from the corporate side of things, how much money they can generate, how much influence that they have over a country, it's incredibly massive. But yeah, good points from Monty. Definitely some different opinions there too, and I'm sure a lot of listeners probably agree or disagree with him, but still, I think it's good to bring it up. James, last but not least, James Ulysses on Facebook, actually posted this on Facebook, said, after watching Japan hold the ball in the backfield for the last 10 minutes of their game against Poland, it reinforces my idea that soccer might be might be slow to come out of a traditionalist mentality, which is hurting the pace and integrity of the game. FIFA has only recently allowed video replays to be assessed, but would it be a good idea to have a backfield violation similar to the backcourt violation in basketball, where a team cannot bring the ball back in their own half once they've crossed the center line? It seems a lot of the time can legally be wasted like this, like what Japan did. This would be also better than a shot clock rule, since I don't think anyone would want to see players forced to take shots from midfield just because the shot clock is winding down. Now, Kartik, I know you're a basketball fan, so you probably know more about what he's talking about here, but what's your thoughts on this?
No.
Yeah, me too.
That violations in basketball are, I mean, it's smaller court, it's a quicker game, although, I mean, I have to say that as pressing has left the game of basketball, we've seen less backcourt violations. Now, that segues nicely to this. The defense against what Japan supposedly did that slowed down the game and hurt the integrity of the game in James' mind is high pressing teams. And we see it at all levels of soccer. Last night I called a match between Miami FC and Naples United, where Naples United decided they were going to press high because Miami FC was keeping the ball in midfield with superior technical players. And instead of sitting deep and absorbing that pressure as they did early in the match, they decided the only way to stop them from, same sort of thing, wasting time, killing, boom, 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 tiki-taka, is to press high. That's a legitimate tactic against it. So in basketball, because it's a small court, if you press, if you have a backcourt press, then the center line comes into play for potential backcourt violation. But in soccer, that doesn't make any sense. I think the defense against that is to press high. In the case of this game, because FIFA had this rule about fair play, and Japan knew they were going through unless they picked up some sort of silly yellow card. I think they decided to play it safe. There was a game between Mexico and Italy years ago, 2002 World Cup. You might remember this, Chris, where Croatia, the final match day, Mexico, Italy, Croatia all had to advance. Croatia got upset by whoever the fourth team in that group was, and I know I'm blanking on it. It was an upset. They got upset. So Mexico and Italy spent the last minutes of the game just giving the ball back to one another. I thought that was a pretty bad spectacle, but these things happen once in a while. I mean, you can't legislate against this constantly. I mean, you can't. This is the problem with one of my big problems with American sport. Anytime there's any sort of thing that there's hot takes on ESPN and people get upset, and the American sports media is very different than our own soccer football media, they legislate to change something. And I don't think that that's the way the sport has evolved in becoming the most popular sport, team sport, by some distance in the world. And the World Cup has become the most popular single sporting event on this planet by some distance, including the Olympics. You don't need to start legislating for because something happened in one game. So, no, my view is absolutely not. We can't do that.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, to me, I actually like the whole method of recycling the ball, playing it back, which is risky at times. I mean, if that other team, the opposition, has a high press, I mean, and is able to intercept one of those balls in the back, it's a one-on-one with the goalkeeper. So it's a different tactic. It's for some games it can be boring, but it's a tactic. I mean, there's a reason that they're doing that. Keeping possession, making the other team either commit or hold back, and it's a game of chess. And to me, even those games with Japan and Poland, it's still exciting to some degree there. But I wouldn't change the rules just because of one incident or very few incidents. All right, guys, you can listen to the podcast every week, of course, on worldsoccertalk.com, but you can always reach us via email through web@worldsoccertalk.com, as well as on Facebook, facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter @worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can post comments on the website, worldsoccertalk.com, under the podcast section there, and we'll be sure to read those out on air. So any feedback, any criticisms, any questions, advice, whatever it is, let us know in regards to the soccer media business. And Kartik, where can they find you on Twitter if you want to catch up on your latest interviews or hot takes?
KKFLA737 on Twitter, and I guess we'll be back to Hot Take Central, Uruguay, France. Friday is just going to be wonderful. The World Cup. Saturday maybe less so, but Friday is going to be amazing. Yeah,
Friday's going to be amazing with Uruguay and Brazil in the separate games, and even Saturday too with England against Sweden and Russia against Croatia. Those are going to be some chess matches.
Croatia, I tell you, there's a lot of potential political problems around that match, historic political issues. So I'm hoping that hoping things are calm, and Russia being the host, my assumption is Croatia will beat. So Saturday I'm a little bit concerned about that game. Not actually,
and I'm all for chaos. So forget the calm stuff.
Then that's chaos, right?
Oh yeah, heck yeah. So it's down to the wire. Really exciting times. And thank you, listeners, for joining in on the podcast with us here to listen into our thoughts. And we definitely want to get your thoughts. So thanks for listening. You can get a new episode of the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday. Every episode is released on SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Audio Boom, and worldsoccertalk.com. If you like the show, share it with your friends on social media and give us a review on iTunes. We'd greatly appreciate it. And Kartik, going into the quarterfinals of the 2018 FIFA World Cup, what should they do this weekend?
Enjoy your football.